So, in today's lecture, we are going to study the nervous system. So, before getting anything complicated in this, let me explain you a simple example. You see here, this is a switch and this is a bulb, and we know that they are connected by a wire. So, when we switch off this switch, then this bulb gets switched off, and we switch on the switch, then the bulb gets on. So the information or anything, you say, the current is traveling in this wire. So same thing occurs in our nervous system. So the same thing happens in our nervous system, that this is a brain. Let's suppose there is the brain and this is our hand. So something connects the brain and the hand. This is a wire, like in the brain sends the signal through this wire and the hand moves. We all know brain controls our body. So brain sends the signal through this wire and the hand moves. So now what is this wire? This wire is actually nerve, and if we examine it closely, then we will see that these wires is made up of small parts. So this big part is made up of small parts, and this one small part is called a neuron. So this, you see, is one neuron. Now what is a neuron? We all know that the normal cells of our body are like this, but if you squeeze this cell from this two direction, you will get a somewhat cell like this. This is not a neuron but a cell of this type, or you better say like this cell. So this is a normal cell of a human body, and this is a cell called neuron. Now what will happen is that many cells will join together. So now what I have drawn, you see, this is a normal cell, this is a neuron. These are three neurons connected, and like this many neurons will connect and make a nerve, which is this nerve. So this nerve connects brain and hand. When the brain gives signal to the hand to move through this nerve. So what we studied here was this switch and bulb were connected by a wire, and this wire was carrying current. In the same here, the brain and the hand are connected by a wire which is called nerve, and this nerve is made up of small parts which are called neuron. So many these type of cells called neuron will join together and make a nerve. So basically what will neuron transfer? The information which brain gives to hand travels through the neuron. So we can simply say that the neuron travel current, or the information travels through the neuron. Likewise in here, the current travels through this wire. In the same way, information travels through this neuron, and this information in this chapter we call this information as nerve impulse. So once again I will tell that in this wire the current is passing, and in this nerve impulse is passing. Nerve impulse and current, you can relate it like this. So now we are going to study the structure of this neuron in detail, that which which part exactly gets the information and which part exactly travels the information or sends the information away. So now we will study the structure of neuron in detail. Okay, so let us start with the structure of a neuron. So this is what a neuron look like. Now I am going to explain the parts of the neuron. So this is a normal cell. We all know that the normal cell has nucleus. In the same way, this is a neuron cell only. So this is this is changed its shape, or you can say that this cell, when the change is shape, it appears like this. So this neuron also has nucleus in here, and other parts of the neuron are, see, this the center part. This is the center part which is called the cell body of the neuron. These fibers that arise from this central part are called dendrites. This long part of the neuron is called axon, and obviously the ending of the neuron is called nerve endings. So there are four important parts, which are first is cell body, which is called actually the body of the cell. So here you can see this looks like a body. This is a large area in here. So this is a cell body. Inside it is a nucleus. In the it's just like a normal cell which has a nucleus here, and the fibers that come out of this are called dendrites. This long part is called axon, and the ending is obviously called nerve ending. So now what I explained you earlier was this was a nerve, and these are small neuron. You see, this one box or this one tukra is this neuron. Many neurons combine together to form a nerve. So we can say that the information travels from this small neuron. So we can say that, let's take an example, that this is your hand. So what happens is that when someone bite your hand or you get hurt, the information first travels through these dendrites, or you can say that dendrites acquire the information. Acquire means to have it. The information first travels through dendrite, and then it goes to this cell body, and then it travels through axon, and then at the nerve ending. So what we studied, first of all, this neuron is present below this hand, or you can say that this is skin, and after skin there will be something else, and then it will be neuron inside this hand. So when someone bites the hand, the information first goes through these dendrites, and then the information travels and goes to the cell body, and then axon, and then the and then the nerve ending. Now what actually is this information? As I told you earlier, that the information is nerve impulse, same as in here it is the current, in the nerve it is nerve impulse. So this information is nerve impulse. So you can say that the dendrites first acquire the nerve impulse, means they first get this information or nerve impulse, and then information this travels through this axon and to the nerve endings. Now we know that this information will go from this neuron to this neuron. Basically this whole is a neuron, this is another neuron, and when they are joined together they will make a nerve like this. So the information will go from this neuron to this neuron, but you will be surprised to know that there is a gap between them. These are not connected. That's why I this is a wire, but I when I draw the neuron, I draw it like this. Why? Because there is a gap in between. So in between the two neurons there is a gap. So now you will be thinking that the information came from here to here. Now how will this information pass from here to here? There is a gap in between them. So what happens is that when the information reaches here, due to that information there is a release of some chemicals. Chemicals are released inside this gap, and this chemical go to the neuron of go to the dendrites of the next neuron, and from there they generate the electric impulse or the nerve impulse. Okay, it's getting complicated. I'm going to make you understand in a simple way. You see, first here someone bite our hand, so due to that a nerve impulse is created, or the information is created, and the information travels through here. So how did this dendrite know that I have to travel this impulse? Due to this hurting, someone bite it, and then from here information goes. Here what happens is that how will this dendrite know that I have to pass this information? So here these nerve ending release some chemicals, because there is a gap, these two are not connected. So this chemical goes in here, and due to this chemical another nerve impulse is generated, and it travels through dendrite, cell body, axon, and the nerve ending. And this is a gap, and this gap is called synapse. Synapse is the gap between two neurons. So there are many neurons like this. These are you can say that many neuron will be like that connected, and at the end what will happen, let's say this information is traveled by hand or brain sends this information. That's what I explained you in this slide here. That is what I explained you here, that the brain sends this information and this information travels through this nerve and goes to the hand or the muscle of the hand, because muscle cause movement. So how will this hand move when this information will go to the muscle of hand? So in the same way here what happens is that this brain sends this information. It can be either hand, this hand example will be explained in the reflex arc or the reflex section, that will explain afterwards. Now understand what happens, that the brain sends the signal. This signal is called nerve impulse. This nerve impulse travels through dendrite, cell body, axon and nerve ending. At the nerve ending, how will this impulse travel from this neuron to this neuron? There is a gap in between. That gap is called synapse. So what happens is that when this information or nerve impulse, basically the nerve impulse is information, reach at this end, due to that some chemical are released, and this chemical go to the dendrite of next neuron, and they make a similar nerve impulse like which occurred here. It same occurs here, and it travels through this neuron, and many neurons like this are connected, and at the last there is a muscle cell. Now which muscle it will be? It can be anything. It can be a muscle of hand, it can be a muscle of leg, any muscle which brain wants to move. Brain wants to move the hand, it will be the muscle of hand. We all know that brain controls everything. So at the end, at muscle cell, there also will be a gap like this. The gap was there between two neurons. Such a gap will also be present between the neuron and the muscle cell. As we know, the information has reached here, and information has to go from here to the muscle cell, then only the muscle cell will move, right? So here also the same thing happens. The information sets the release of some chemicals, and these chemicals, due to these chemicals, the muscle cell moves. Now what actually are these chemicals? You don't have to know, it's not in your syllabus. There are neurotransmitters. You don't have to know that. Okay, so the gap between two neurons was called synapse, and the gap between muscle cell and neuron will be called neuromuscular junction. Junction is like a gap, and muscular refers to this muscle cell, neuro refers to this neuron. So the gap between neuron and muscle is called neuromuscular junction. So now we will study the theory about this. I will explain to you all the theory, but we will study it so that we can write our answers properly. So let's read what it is given. So they say all information from our environment is detected by specialized tips of some nerve cells. Now this is a nerve cell. These branches are dendrites, and these are tip of dendrites, which they detect the information. Like if someone has hurt your hand or legs, then they detect that information and send them to brain, and the brain senses that pain. So this is how they are, like wires. They travel the information. So information acquired at the tip of the dendrite of a nerve cell sets off a chemical reaction that creates an electric impulse. Now what does this mean? This dendrite acquires electric impulse. So these dendrite acquire information. How? When someone hurts it or hurts your hand, the information is passed to this dendrite because it is just below the skin. This dendrite is below the skin. So when the hand is hurt, the information will go to here, and when the information goes here, there is a chemical reaction, and due to that chemical reaction, an impulse or electric impulse is generated. Same way here, the current is generated. In the same way, here electric impulse is generated, and this electric impulse travels along the neuron. See the path of the electric impulse. Electric impulse travels from dendrite, which is the fibers. These are fibers of dendrites. Then through long axon, and at the last at the nerve ending. See, at the end of axon, the electric impulse sets off release of some chemical. So what happens is that in this gap this impulse cannot travel because it is a gap. It can travel only through this neuron. The impulse can travel through this neuron only. You can relate the word impulse as current. Impulse is current, impulse is current. Current travel through wire, impulse travel through this nerves. So impulse can travel only through this neuron. But in this gap, this impulse release some chemical, and this chemical basically tell this neuron that they have to pass the impulse ahead. So chemical connect, or they take information from here and bring information to here because there is a gap called synapse. This chemical cross the gap synapse, as we know. They cross this gap and set off similar electric impulse in the dendrite of the next, because or in the next dendrite they set off the similar impulse. So the similar synapse finally allow the delivery of impulse from neuron to the other cells, like this neuron to muscle cell. There is a similar synapse, and here also chemicals will be released, and they will, tell this muscle that they have to move, or the brain have told them to move. So this was all about the nerve cells.